I only placed the order for family," my mother-in-law Diane announced with a polished smile, sliding perfectly seared steaks onto plates everyone's except mine. 7 dishes, 6 Carters, and me sitting with a half-picked piece of chicken that wasn't even part of the restaurant meal. The expensive pastries that followed were handed around the table, the same way, everyone receiving one, except me. My fingers curled tightly around the linen napkin on my lap, twisting it until my hands trembled. The dining room felt enormous and suffocating at the same time, the chandelier scattering fractured light across the crystal glasses I had helped arrange earlier. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my throat as nearly 20 eyes flicked back and forth between Diane and me, waiting for what would happen next. "My name is Laura, I'm 31, and I work as a financial coordinator. And this is how I finally stood up for myself after 6 years of staying quiet. Am I considered family or not?" I asked my husband, Ethan, who continued slicing into his perfectly pink steak without even glancing my way. "Not now, don't start here," he muttered through a mouthful of food, but his refusal to look at me said everything he didn't dare speak. The table dropped into silence, not the kind that comes when a conversation ends naturally, but the heavy, suffocating quiet of shared unease. To my left, Sophie, his sister, shifted uncomfortably. "Ethan," she said softly but firmly, "your wife asked you something." I hadn't come here planning a confrontation, but deep down, I'd been bracing for this moment for years. Every small insult, every snide whisper, every time Ethan chose his family's approval over our marriage, it all condensed into this moment of intentional exclusion. Ethan and I had met through mutual friends at a Sunday reading circle back when I was already working steadily as a finance assistant at a regional grocery chain. He was finishing his master's in public policy, always looking at me with this quiet admiration. "You amaze me," he'd tell me. "You're juggling full-time work while I'm just writing research papers. Makes me feel useless." I'd believed him back then, thought his words meant commitment. When he secured a job as a budget officer at Ridgewood City Hall, we moved into a small rental on the edge of the city. That's when I met his parents, Diane and Harold. Diane wore judgment the way others wore perfume, light but impossible to ignore. Harold shook my hand as if he expected a refund. His older sister, Sophie, who had never worked a single day in her life, acted like this was some sort of personal achievement. Diane's first words after scanning me from head to toe were, "Oh, I imagined you'd be taller." Harold chimed in right after, "So, Laura, I heard you never finished college." The word college dripped out of his mouth like an accusation instead of a question. I didn't react back then. I had started paying my own bills at 18, and I'd made choices I stood by. Choices I never questioned until this family made me feel like I had to constantly defend my worth. For a while, Ethan would stand up for me. "She puts in more work than anyone I know." He'd say, "My parents can be dramatic. Don't let it bother you." At first, I didn't. I kept smiling when Diane brought overpriced pastries exclusively for Ethan. I stayed silent when she wrinkled her nose at my budget coffee. But little by little, the jabs multiplied, and Ethan's defenses slowly disappeared. "She can't even handle investments." I once heard Harold whisper after glancing at a pay stub Diane had fished out of our shared mailbox during one of their visits. "I don't know how you keep up with all that tedious work," Sophie would say with artificial sympathy. I could never do grunt labor like that. Sometimes I'd walk into the living room to find Diane rifling through my drawers under the excuse of looking for napkins. Once she pulled out my budget notebook and sighed dramatically. "Hardly any savings and no investment portfolio," she announced. Then to Ethan, "You should have married someone with at least a proper financial plan." Still, I kept trying. Every birthday, every holiday, every awkward dinner I showed up. I cooked, cleaned, smiled, poured drinks. One Christmas, everyone else received personalized, thoughtful gifts with handwritten cards. I got a candle someone had clearly regifted. No one seemed to notice, not even Ethan. By year 6, my marriage had become painfully clear. I was basically the hired help with a marriage certificate. Yet I held on. We didn't have children, but we had history, and some naive hope inside me believed time might bring us back to each other. That foolish hope kept me walking into their home with my chin raised, even as my stomach tightened. Last summer, they planned a trip to a lakeside cabin, family getaway. Diane told me, urging me to pack. But when Ethan and I arrived at his parents' house, they simply left without me while I was in the bathroom. Just drove off. Mom said it should be, just blood family. Ethan explained later that night when he got home, as if he were reporting weather, not cruelty. But I'm your wife, yeah, he replied, but you're not blood. The words sliced deeper than he realized. Or maybe he knew exactly what he was doing. Now it was time for their annual August family luncheon, with relatives flying in from all over. By some miracle, my workplace had given our entire team 3 days off for an internal wellness initiative. I should have gone to the beach. Instead, I got drafted. Diane called the night before. You'll help with the preparations. Guests expect a certain standard. Standard meant I was up at 6 a.m., chopping vegetables, dusting shelves, vacuuming, wiping down glassware, while Ethan, Diane, and Harold enjoyed espresso on the patio. I ironed linen napkins until my back ached. Sophie strolled in around noon. Don't forget a vegan dish for Aunt Caroline, she said, and vanished again. By lunchtime, exhaustion was etched into my bones. My arms burned, my back throbbed, and I hadn't even had my first cup of coffee. Guests arrived cheerful and loud. I forced a smile, guided them to seats, refilled drinks, reheated sauces. Ethan didn't lift a finger. When I asked him quietly to carry out the roast, he said, "You're doing fine," without even looking up. Only once everyone had settled and food started circulating did I allow myself to sit down. That's when Diane rose to her feet. "I have a surprise," she announced, her smile dripping sweetness, "just for family." She disappeared into the kitchen and returned holding a tray of 7 perfectly cooked filet medallions, shining with juices. She placed them before Harold, Sophie, Ethan, and 3 other relatives. "And dessert," she added, lifting a pristine white box filled with imported French tarts. For the family, of course. The room buzzed with delighted murmurs. Everyone applauded except me. There was no 7th steak, no tart, only my half-eaten roast chicken from earlier. Now, with my question hanging in the air and Ethan refusing to answer, something inside me finally snapped free, not in anger, but in a calm, powerful certainty that surged through me. "Oh, I think this is exactly the right place," I said, my voice steady though my hands trembled. "This isn't about the steak or the dessert. This is about 7 years of being treated like a tenant in your son's life, like the outsider you all never intended to accept." Harold let out a dismissive laugh. "No one ever told you you weren't welcome." "No," I said calmly. "You just implied it every chance you got. Every comment about me not being educated enough, not refined, not the right type of family. Every dirty look, every backhanded remark. Every time you went through my belongings trying to find something to judge." Sophie scoffed, "You're being dramatic." I turned toward her, cold anger settling into my chest. "You haven't worked a single day in your life. I've been the one holding this marriage together financially for almost a year. While your brother pretends he still goes to work every morning, so yes. I think I've earned the right to be dramatic." Ethan's head jerked up. "Laura, stop talking." "Or what?" I asked quietly. "Your image will crack. Hate to disappoint you, but everyone here is about to learn you haven't had a job since last October." A ripple moved through the table. Diane blinked rapidly. Ethan, what is she saying? Ethan's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I leaned forward, my heartbeat steady. He was terminated from Ridgewood City Hall after he approved tax forms with major errors. Hundreds of residents received the wrong invoices, some off by thousands. Ethan was responsible for the final review. Gasps rose around the room. He didn't tell you. I continued, because you were too busy judging my choice of coffee. That's not true. Ethan shot back, but even he didn't sound convinced. Since then, I've covered everything: rent, utilities, groceries, car repairs. While he sat at home applying for jobs he wasn't even qualified for. A thick silence spread over the table. Aunt Patricia lowered her fork. Ethan, is this true? He shot to his feet. This is insane. You're trying to embarrass me. No, Ethan, I said softly. You embarrassed yourself the moment you let your mother treat me like a servant, and you stayed silent. Diane slammed her glass down. You do not speak to my son like that. And you don't speak to me like I'm disposable, I replied. I reached into my bag and set a slim manila folder in front of Ethan. The sound echoed across the table. What's this? He asked, voice suddenly uncertain. Draft separation papers. I said, I met with an attorney last week. I'm done living like this. I'm not waiting for your permission. The room froze. Even Sophie stopped mid-chew. You're overreacting, Harold muttered. Am I? You've spent years sighing whenever I walked into a room, looking at my hands like I wasn't clean enough to be here. Sophie snapped. You're just mad because you never fit in. You never had class, Laura. I smiled faintly. And yet somehow I'm the only one here who knows how to manage a mortgage. Diane stood sharply. You think this makes you superior? You're nothing but a cashier's clerk, actually. I corrected. I'm a finance officer. And I was just promoted to regional finance coordinator. Unlike your son, I actually check documents before approving them. Ethan shoved the folder back toward me. You're not doing this. I already have, I said. His voice cracked. You're ending our marriage over one lunch. No, I replied quietly. I'm ending it because I've lived like a stranger in my own life. Because you let them grind me down until I forgot I had choices. He stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. Maybe he'd never bothered to. I turned to Aunt Patricia. I'm sorry you had to witness this. She set her napkin down gently. Don't apologize, dear. You've shown more grace today than most people could. Then she faced Diane. And you. You should be ashamed. You humiliated your daughter-in-law in front of everyone. She's not my daughter-in-law anymore. Diane snapped. I nodded. And you'll never have the chance again. Ethan's voice dropped. You really mean it? You're leaving me. I didn't answer. I simply stood, walked into the kitchen, grabbed my purse, and returned to the dining room. I'll send the official papers this week, I said. Diane crossed her arms. Don't expect sympathy from anyone. Aunt Patricia rose to her feet. Actually, Diane, I think you'll find the family feels differently. What are you talking about? Diane demanded. We're tired. Patricia said plainly, tired of the drama, the cruelty you disguise as tradition. I won't be attending your Christmas brunch. You're joking, but several cousins nodded in agreement. I turned toward the door. Ethan tried one last time. Laura, please don't do this. I paused in the doorway. You had 6 years to treat me like family, I said without turning. You chose silence. Then I walked out. The walk down the driveway lasted maybe 10 seconds, the quietest 10 seconds of my life. No chasing footsteps, no apologies, only the sound of my heels against concrete and the heavy August heat rising around me. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. 20 minutes later, I pulled into my driveway. I had already messaged my lawyer to proceed. The folder had been real. The conversations had been real. I just hadn't planned to use them so soon, but there was no point waiting anymore. The final straw wasn't the steak. It was Ethan's silence. The following week blurred into paperwork and cold coffee. I moved into the guest bedroom and kept my distance. Ethan tried to pretend it was just an argument. People divorce over affairs, not over lunch. He told me, "You're being theatrical." But something in him had shifted. He stopped going out, stopped pretending to job hunt. He just sank. Meanwhile, I stayed busy. I accepted the promotion at my company's main office, full salary bump, flexible remote schedule, and relocation in 3 months. I didn't tell Ethan. There was no reason to. What I did tell him was the court date. Mediation was set for September 9th. I filed no fault, but underneath, there was plenty of fault to go around. And then 3 days before the hearing, my phone rang. It was Aunt Patricia, the one person in that entire family who had ever shown me sincere kindness. "I just wanted you to know," Aunt Caroline said softly, "you weren't the only one who noticed what happened. What they did to you at that dinner, that was a reckoning." Apparently, news had spread fast. The cousins and in-laws who had silently endured the meal were outraged after I left. Some confronted Diana directly while others walked out early. Caroline ended up telling the entire extended family in their group chat, where Diana's cruelty became the main topic of conversation. Her message was simple: you don't starve someone and call it hospitality. The consequences were swift. Diana and Richard were politely removed from 2 upcoming family weddings. Sophie, who once bragged that everyone wanted her at their events, didn't receive a single invitation for weeks. Turns out, a polished reputation doesn't protect you from accountability. And Ethan, he was falling apart. One night, I walked into our apartment and found him half drunk on the couch, staring blankly. "This is what you wanted, right?" He slurred. "To burn everything down." "No," I said quietly. "I just stopped pretending the ashes were flowers." On August 12th, I arrived at the Fairmill County Courthouse for our scheduled mediation. Ethan wore a suit that looked one size too small and avoided my eyes. I wore a navy blazer, tied my hair back, and brought organized folders filled with every payment, transfer, and statement from the 11 months he'd been unemployed. My lawyer barely needed to speak. The numbers did all the talking. At the end, Ethan finally looked at me as if he might say something honest. Instead, he muttered, "I can't believe you're doing this to me." I stood and replied, "No, Ethan, I can't believe you did this to me." Our divorce was finalized 3 weeks later, on September 2nd, without any ceremony or relief. The judge ordered Ethan to repay half of what I covered during his unemployment, deducted monthly from whatever job he could eventually secure. I went home, ordered Thai noodles, and slept for 12 hours. This silence felt different, earned, not forced. Weeks passed. Diana attempted damage control. She emailed me a half-hearted apology filled with phrases like, "I'm sorry if you felt hurt," and we all say things in the heat of the moment. I didn't respond. I archived it and went on with my life. 3 months later, in early December, my promotion required me to relocate to Harbor City, 2 states away. My new apartment was bright, with a south-facing balcony and a dishwasher that didn't rattle like it was protesting. I updated my contact info only with essentials: my employer, my bank, and Aunt Caroline, who had become a genuine friend. My coworkers welcomed me with gift baskets and plants. My new manager said, "We've heard nothing but great things about you." It was the first time in years I felt recognized for who I was, not for what I lacked. One night in late January, my phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. It was Ethan. A mutual friend had given him my new contact info after hearing about my transfer. I miss you," he whispered. I said nothing. "I think we got lost. I should have spoken up that day. I should have stood by you." "Ethan," I said gently, "you had 7 years." "I know," he said. "I was scared." "Of who?" "Your mother. Of everything," he admitted. There was a long pause. "I've been thinking about coming to see you." "Maybe talk face to face." I looked out at the glowing skyline of my new life. "No need," I said. Everything I needed to hear I heard in that dining room. He didn't argue, he just breathed heavily, the way someone does when they finally realize something is too late. "So that's it?" he asked. "That's it. I hung up and stood still for several minutes, letting the quiet settle around me. No criticism, no tension, no footsteps pacing, no passive-aggressive sighs. Just me, my apartment, and a basil plant begging for water. Some truths cut deep even when unspoken, and some silences, they're the beginning of healing.